All right, guys. Hi, IOME community. I am thrilled that you guys are joining and watching in on this recording. And for those of you that are joining live, thank you guys so much because this is a topic that's very near and dear to my heart, especially these days, given everything that has happened in these last, 12 months almost exactly, huh? Here in just a week. So I'm so grateful for you guys to attend this training on how to overcome loneliness. And really talking about the healing power of human connection because it is so important, like I said, now more than ever, I believe. So I really liked this quote. It says, medicine and technology may fail us at times, but human connection and love and compassion always heals. And so I'm going to actually be referencing this book by Dr. Vivek Murthy, and he was the 19th Surgeon General of the United States. So kind of a great big deal, right? And he wrote this book called Together. It's called The Healing Power of Human Connection in a Sometimes Lonely World. Now, remember, he actually wrote this book pre-COVID, pre-pandemic. And so he was realizing the importance of connection and the devastation of loneliness far before we became a socially distanced world. And so anyways, it's just a really fascinating read. If you guys like light reading, it's kind of interesting to dive in and check that out. It's been really a powerful conversation that I've been having with my clients and with myself and my family and the people that I care about because it's a big deal. So that leads me to be able to have this conversation with you all, the IOME community, because that is exactly what we get to create here today with you guys, is this sense of community and connection. And yes, sometimes we have to do it virtually, but every quarter we're going to be doing something in person and create just a really fun place to be able to connect. So I'm going to skip through a few of these slides. I created this for a different training before, but it's got the good content that we're going to review, so it won't take terribly long to go over some of the statistics and things like that. So bear with me. I'm going to skip over some stuff. You guys know who I am. You know all about me. Of course, I'm a licensed counselor. If you are brand new to the IOME community, founder of IOME, I am so proud that I get to lead this incredible group and do something that I am crazy passionate about. Really, truly, I am. So I am also a wife to a handsome cowboy and mama of two little ones as well. So just a little bit about me. I'd love for you guys to share in the comment section a little bit about you. Who are you? What's a fun fact about who you are? Tell us, who keeps you connected. Is it your family? Is it kids? Is it loved ones, etc.? So we'd love to hear more about that. So we're going to just dive right in, you guys. So the definition right off the bat of loneliness, like what the heck is it? What does it even mean? So it's the subjective feeling that you are lacking the social connections that you need. Okay. This lack of feeling closeness, it's a lack of feeling trust. It's a lack of feeling this affection of genuine friends, loved ones, and that sense of community. And so we're going to go through, yes, I'm going to 100% share some alarming statistics with you because it's good to know the detriment of what loneliness is doing to us. And so we're going to be able to jump on and talk about the statistics and some of those concerning pieces of the puzzle. And then we're going to talk about what types of loneliness there is, the difference between loneliness and solitude. And then I'm going to walk you through a worksheet that I created to be able to help increase your overall connections. So yes, so hang on and bear with me as we go through that together. Okay. So moving right along, these are all, you see the what's the word when you reference the reference there. Again, these are all coming from this book by Dr. Vivek Murthy. He did all the beautiful studies and all the things, so it's all coming straight from there. So the statistics behind loneliness, again, this was pre-COVID type numbers, so I'm sure these are increasing pretty drastically in the past year. But anyway, so over 22% of adults in the United States say they often or always feel lonely or socially isolated. Now, I think it's important to recognize that loneliness is probably one of the most common and most felt feelings out there, but it is the least talked about. And so we are learning why this is. And I think a big piece of this puzzle of why we aren't talking about it or why we're even admitting to it, because when you look at that, it's like 22%, that doesn't feel like a lot. But I think that number is actually a lot more. Again, yes, a lot more because of COVID stuff, but even more so than that because a lot of people don't admit that we're lonely. Hey, Jessica, I'm so glad to see you, honey. Um, so a lot of us don't even admit that we're lonely because it has a lot of shame around it, right? Loneliness is something that is really like medical fields really avoid it. It's not a very like black and white answer. Yes, I'm lonely. No, I'm not lonely. Oh, maybe I'm lonely, right? There's so much in between. So I think that it's important to remember that these statistics are big and they are alarming, but I bet that they're even bigger and even more alarming if we were to actually like think about it, right? And answer honestly without the shame associated, without the sometimes we can feel embarrassed because it's like, well, if I'm lonely, then maybe it's because I'm doing something wrong, which isn't the case. We're going to talk more about that here in a minute. So, anyways, kind of put that into perspective as we look through these statistics. So, then that, just to put it into more bigger perspective, is well over 55 million people. Okay, far more than the number of adult cigarette smokers. Isn't that crazy? And nearly double the number of those who have diabetes. 1 in 3 American adults over the age of 45 are lonely. And so I actually pulled from the UCLA Lonely Assessment and I was able to put that on the website and it is on the IOMI community page for the mind, the mental health one. So go in there and fill that assessment out. See you how you answer it honestly, right? And we'll come back and I'm happy to have a conversation with those that do fill that out honestly, because it's one of those good aha moments that we can have. Okay, so now this is where it like hits me like a ton of bricks. So then we have the statistics of how many people are affected by loneliness. Again, probably pretty small number. And now we have the risk factors of involved of loneliness. Okay, so people with strong social relationships, right? People who are not feeling that loneliness are 50% less likely to die prematurely than people with weak social relationships. Whew, right? And then it goes on to talk about the risk factor of feeling lonely. And it's as if it's the impact, right? This impact of lacking lacking social relationships on reducing lifespan is equal to the risk of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Whew. Greater than the risk associated with obesity, excess alcohol consumption, lack of exercise. Loneliness is associated with a greater risk of coronary heart disease, high blood pressure, stroke, dementia, depression, and anxiety, right? And this one blows my mind even more because lonely people have a lower quality sleep, more immune system dysfunction, and more impulsive behavior and impaired judgment. So here we are trying to fight this pandemic, right? And again, like this is all relevant information before the pandemic. I feel like we were all getting to a place where we were, too reliant on our technology. And so here we are trying to fight this pandemic and being even like significantly more distanced to other people and it's affecting our immune system. Like, whoa, right? And I'm not saying that you have to go out there and we're not going to talk about risk levels and we're not going to talk about the pandemic in that way. But what I am talking about is how can you increase those connections? And you can do that socially distanced, right? Physically distanced, I should say, but not socially distanced, right? So it's just a really crazy idea of like recognizing that that is impacting us physically. The psychosomatic effect of loneliness is really truly impacting us in a big way. And so again, this is going to be distinct from isolation, or sometimes we hear solitude, and we're going to talk about that as well. So loneliness is subjective, right? This is just a feeling. It's not measurable. It's this internal comfort level. Okay, so that sense of being at home, it's kind of it's what we're longing for. We want to feel at home with other people. Makes sense. And so if we don't have that sense of feeling at home with somebody else, anybody else, we may experience more loneliness. Isolation, however, describes the objective physical state of being alone and out of touch with people. Okay. It is, of course, a risk factor to increase your loneliness, your chances of loneliness, but it doesn't necessarily have to translate over to loneliness. So, given the state that we've been in, and I'm hoping and praying that we're coming through and getting on the tail end of the situation, but we can be isolated, we can be distanced, but we do not need to be socially disconnected, right? That's the most important thing here that we want to talk about. So I'm not going to say like go out there and you do you. Okay, I promise. Like you do you. I'm going to do me. You be safe. You do what you need to and what you feel like you need to do. But make sure, I will say, make sure that you stay connected, whatever that looks like for you. Okay. So then there's solitude. And solitude is a beautiful thing. Solitude is the state of personal aloneness or voluntary isolation. So it's a good thing. It's good to have solitude from time to time. Like I need my breaks. I need my solitude. I need an opportunity to self-reflect, to be able to connect with my own like how am I, right? Connect with my body, to connect with my mind, my soul, my spiritual, my right, my faith, connect with all of those things. And it can be really hard for us to do that when we are busy, 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 right? And so unlike loneliness, the solitude that I'm talking about is not burdened. It's not a bad thing. And it doesn't come associated with shame, often like loneliness does. Okay. So it can bring on, sometimes I think that sense of solitude can be really scary for some people because then it can bring in these negative emotions or negative thoughts, or it can send us on this spiral. And so I think a lot of people may well, I shouldn't say a lot of people, but I think some people may avoid solitude because it's really scary. Does that make sense? Right. And I get that, but so hopefully you hear my heart. Like I want you to be able to have that sense of solitude. I think that's a good thing. I think that's healthy, right? But I also want you to stay connected and avoid this sense of loneliness. So we're going to talk about how we can do that and which areas we can increase together. Okay. So then there's these three dimensions of loneliness. Again, coming from the book. And there's this intimate emotional section of loneliness. Okay. So this is, and basically what he says is that we have these three, and we could be killing it and rocking it in two of them. But if we're missing one of them, it still is impacting us. Right now, if we're missing all three, then we're definitely, affected by this pretty big time, but we could be doing really well in one or two areas, but one of those areas isn't, and it still is impacting us. It's not like we can make up for one of those areas with a different one. Okay. So that intimate emotional level of connection is this longing for a close confidant or intimate partner. Okay, so just having that, and it doesn't have to be a romantic or a sexual relationship at all. It could be just a best friend that you, again, feel at home with, somebody that you can be intimate in that way of like close conversations and vulnerability and um, trust and respect, right? To where you can just be you, 100% you. Like that is my favorite thing. People will always ask me, how did I know my husband was the one?" 100% hands down, I knew he was the one because I could be myself, flaws and all, and it was at home, right? Like I could just be myself. That's what I think we're striving for at that level. Then there's the relational, the social piece of loneliness. And so this is yearning for that quality friendship or social companionship and support. Again, so having some more of that social piece. So it's not quite as in depth as like this intimate emotional one. And yeah, probably that would be more from a partner, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. But being able to find more people that you can have a social relationship with. So quality friends, again, people that you can laugh with, that you can have fun with, that you could just again be yourself, I think, definitely, but you may not have to be at that level of like vulnerability as that intimate emotional dimension, right? And so who are those people for you? Is that piece of this puzzle missing? Is that kind of falling short, do you think? And I know I'll be honest and transparent, I think for a long time I was missing that piece. Like I had some acquaintances and I could BS with my colleagues and, hang out and make conversation pretty easily, but there wasn't that quality friendship like I had in college or high school. That was really missing in those early adult life years of mine. And anyway, so I was starting to become very intentional about this within the last couple of years, and it's been really helpful to focus on that. Okay, the next piece is this collective sense, right? So it's this loneliness is is like hungry for a network or community of people who share your sense of purpose and interests. I love this one. Obviously, I think Iomi can help support in this way, right? Um, we can bring that sense of connection and community and that sense of purpose of like, hey, we're going to kick butt at self-care. That's our purpose, that's our interest, that's what we're excited about, that's how we can come together around, right? Or maybe it's your church. Church is a great way to have that sense of collective connection. Maybe it's a volunteer opportunity, or maybe you're, helping out at your, I don't know, your local just nonprofit, anything, right? Just the sense of being able to add value and a sense of giving back can be helpful in that way too. But just like it says, a sense of purpose and having that to be shared with a group of people, right? So I really loved this, and transparently, I think that I didn't realize I was missing that until honestly I joined a direct sales company. And as crazy as it sounds, but like that's really what gave me this, like I was hungry for that sense of network and that sense of community and having that same purpose and drive, and that I think is what honestly made me love it so much so fast. um right, and so that led me to realizing like, okay, I need to find more of that, maybe. And obviously, long story short, the direct sales wasn't exactly for me, so I was able to recognize that and go out and try to find a replacement for it. And for me personally, I was able to do that with my church, which is a great space to do so, right? And then trying to be a little bit more open to the ideas of like, how could we also be giving back and, having that sense of purpose with other people. And rodeo, I think, is a big way for that, for us to get that as well. So those are just some examples. And I think it's really important that we break down those three. And so what I'm going to do is actually, in just a minute, we're going to talk about the assessment, this little, excuse me, the little worksheet that I have here that we're going to be able to, how we can list different ways to improve those areas. So hold on just a sec. We're going to get into that. But like I mentioned, there's an assessment that I have on the community, right? So you can go in there and you can click through and you can start to identify like, okay, am I feeling that sense of being at home with people? What's that look like? What's not working? What's what am I missing? Which area, etc. And you're going to fill that out, and then you're going to be able to, you can schedule a call with your, if you're at the Community Plus or Plus Pro, you have your therapist, your trained supporter on board, and have that conversation. It's such a great place to dive deeper and talk about each of these sections. We're trained in it to be able to have a more thorough conversation about which areas are missing for you, and which areas are going great too. That's a good part of the conversation as well. So once we start to realize these areas, and I do think that it's something that has to be worked on pretty regularly. Like I wish that I could say, okay, I'm married, so I'm always going to feel connected and never feel lonely in my marriage and that intimate social, or that intimate emotional piece. Well, let's just be real. That still happens, and 100% we still have to work on it, because I don't, well, that's a whole nother conversation for another day, but but it's real. So these things are something that we can need to continue to work on, um, that we need to continue to build and to create a preventative plan, right? Like my purpose is to prevent me and my husband from ever getting to this place of like being so disconnected that we would even think about getting a divorce or something like that, right? So the plan is to prevent these things from happening if they already are, if they haven't happened, right? Um, and then, so it's never too late. So that's like, it's always just this working mold that we're going to be continually working on and developing. Okay. And so here are just some super simple, obvious, they're somewhat obvious, but I think that it's important to talk about it because sometimes it's like, gosh, I'm an adult and I'm successful and I have a career or I'm happy where I'm at, but I'm missing these pieces. And so let's dive into that. So obviously being able to spend quality time with those you love, right? We are often surrounded by people, maybe not as much these days, but we can be, right? Whether that's work or school, um, or colleagues, or gosh, we're on Zoom calls all day in front of everybody. But did you have like a meaningful conversation with any of them? You know, did you have any quality time with any of them? And I get it, work is quality. Like it's good to work, of course, but even with my kids, I think about it because we get home or they get home from school and the little one gets home from daycare and then we just go through the motions and we get all the things checked off the list and then we go to bed. And it's like, man, did I even ask? Like, I surface level, how was your day? Fine, good, okay, great, blah, blah. Um, but then come to find out, like, if I really poke and prod, then Briar, like, once I start to ask those quality questions, then she goes on like a whole tangent about all the things that happen. I'm like, man, if I wanted to have like sat down and just connected with her and spent some quality time with her, she wouldn't have told me this whole thing that happened. I'm the same way. I'm so bad at it. Tyler said, how's your day? It was a shit day, but I don't tell him. And then I just go to bed with all of that in my head and my heart. That's on me. That's not on him. He asked, you know? So, so I love that. Like just, devoting at least 15 minutes each day connecting to those that you care about. And maybe it's going to be that you call a sister and the next day you call a best friend, or maybe you call like an old high school or college friend that it's been years since you've connected. That's okay. Do it. I promise you, you're going to add value. You're going to light that person's life, right? Like you're going to light them up. You're going to excite them to be like, oh my gosh, so and so's calling. How cool. I'm still Becky White and like, everybody's phone from when I knew them before I was married. And it's so funny. I'll call and they're like, Becky White. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I haven't been called that in 10 years now. So anyways, it's just kind of a fun way to kind of connect and do. So I love that. Just super simple, 15 minutes, not much, but connecting with people. The other piece is to focus on each other. So again, eliminating distractions when interacting with others, giving that person your full attention. Don't be making dinner and folding laundry and doing all of those things while trying to have these conversations because it's too easy. And for heaven's sakes, like, and I'm saying this to myself, we got to get off our phones. We got to get off our phones when we're having conversations with these people. We love them. They deserve our undivided attention. They deserve eye contact, right? They deserve nonverbal communication as they're talking. Okay. And it's tough. It's so tough. Tyler and we're bad about it. And so we got to be more intentional about that. So I'm saying that to myself. So this one is a good one, and I think this is definitely a huge piece of the IOMI mission is the self-care, right? And so embracing that solitude. I think it's really good to be able to. It's the whole saying, right? You can't love yourself before, or you can't love another person until you love yourself. It's that same kind of thing. You can't be connected with somebody else until you're connected to yourself. And so this is a beautiful space of developing that relationship with yourself. Um, Embracing solitude. So maybe, and I think that's why meditation can be so hard for me because it's like I get bored and then I get all the thoughts kind of just go and so you got to be really intentional about it. But sit in your own thoughts and maybe on the next commute to work you don't listen to the radio, you don't listen to any messages on your phone or podcasts or anything. Maybe you just sit in silence and you just kind of reflect and you ask yourself those same kinds of questions like how is your day, how is my day? I mean, it's, yeah, that was actually really hard, this thing that happened. Or I feel, right, we feel things so much physically. I know when I have that, like that gut feeling, like that flip of my stomach, and I'll ignore it because I'm busy, and then finally I'm like, man, what's that feeling? And then I have to sit down and I'm like, oh yeah, it was because so and so said this to me and that hurt, that sucked, right? And then kind of processing that by myself. if I wouldn't slow down and think about it, then I would have just gone through this whole motion of, I don't even know, same thing. I would have just gone to bed with it, you know? Um, I really love this next one, help and be helped. Man, that's a tough one. That's so hard. But being able to give and receive both, being able to strengthen the ability, oftentimes I imagine that it's more hard to receive the help than it is to give the help for a handful of us, I think. And so being willing to, one, admit that you need help, and then for two, to go and ask for it. Like, that's tough, you know. Um, but it's that vulnerability, it's that willingness to be real and honest and truthful about needing help that's going to allow that person to really see you and have that like intimate connection with you, to be able to to create that closeness, right? To be able, just like it says, to be able to strengthen that social bond. Isn't that such a beautiful thing? I mean, if we think back, and once I get through the content, we'll have an open dialogue about these kinds of things, without the recording on. But looking back, like, your best friends, whether it's through school or maybe today, present day, like, how did you guys become best friends? Is it over like something that was painful? Was it over something that you needed help or they needed help and you connected over, you know what I mean? Like something pretty tough. I can look back and say, yeah, right? So that's a couple of them. Again, this kind of, we already echoed it a little bit, but being able to just make sure that you give yourself the time to connect with yourself, understanding your own value, your own worth, being able to stay grounded. I really love grounding techniques, because again, we go 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 and we forget to just slow down and like look at the beautiful, scenery, and look at the and really recognize how we're feeling today, here and now, right? One of the best kind of grounding exercises is to identify your five senses. So look around and see something, right? What do you smell? Take a deep breath. And what do you smell? What do you taste right now? What do you hear? So just kind of getting grounded in that here and now can be really important, and a big piece of that, connecting with your own self. Um, this was a good kind of an aha moment for me, was that emotional tax. So we it's this idea of like, when we're not being ourselves, when we're around people that we can't be authentic with, then we're having to pay a price for that, right? Like, we're having to pay energy and a lot of effort into that conversation. So I want you to start recognizing, when you leave a conversation, how drained are you feeling, or how energized are you feeling? Because oftentimes, if we leave a conversation and it's like, oh my gosh, that was so exhausting, or man, that was really draining, I'm so tired, and just kind of felt heavy, then more than likely you weren't able to be present in that fully as yourself. You were having to show up with like this mask, or this face, or this identity, or the shoulds, and you were having to like maintain that, or you were having to like give way too much, or you were having to just be somebody that you weren't really, you're not. And that's draining. And so we have to recognize, how much of that emotional tax are we able and willing to pay? So then recognize and look through the social connections you do have right now, and be able to say like, oh my gosh, every time I get off the phone with that person, like, I am drained, and yeah, it might be because of, whatever reasons, but then identify the people that, man, I just got off the phone. I'm like, I'm energized. I'm pumped up. Like, man, they, well, electrocuted me. I'm excited. I'm ready to go kick some butt. Like, those are the people that you were able to be more real and honest and kind of feeling at home with, right? So I think doing an inventory on that would be really helpful. Um, so I would definitely recommend that as well. It's kind of that difference of the being and the doing, right? Like, we have to be willing to be ourselves before we can do anything, right? We have to just, it's just that idea of like being authentic, I think, is just the important piece, because we can do all day long. I can pretend to be this and that and the other, but it's going to be exhausting. It's not going to be something that I can withstand, you know? Okay. So then I'm going to go over this really quickly because this is for the recording for people who are going to watch this later. And then we will stop the recording and have more of an open conversation with those that are attending live. So yeah, I love this quote. Human connection is as essential to our well-being as food and water. It is that important, okay? So like mentioned, research has identified these three different dimensions, okay, of loneliness, and it's important to reflect the particular type that is missing to understand which of those is missing or which of several, maybe several of them are missing, okay? So then what I want you to do is to sit down and this printout is on the community. So within the community, you'll be able to download and print this worksheet, or you can just jot it down on a notepad, whatever you want to do there. And recognize which ones are lacking. Okay, and maybe you're going to circle or highlight or star or however you want to do, underline the one that you really need to work on the most. Is it that intimate emotional relationship? Is it the relational, like the social one? Is it that sense of collective, right? That sense of bigger community relationships? Is that the one that's needing some extra TLC? Okay, so then you're going to recognize that. I want you to fill the worksheet out for each of them, but I really want you to be honest and transparent with yourself on which one is it that you really need to be tackling first. Maybe you need to tackle all three, that's okay. But which one is the one that like, oh, just makes you feel a little more empty, a little more lonely when you look at it from afar. Okay. So then these are just some simple ways of improving. And you got it. Again, this is part of that self-reflection piece is you have to know how you can improve these areas for you, right? Because if you were to show up as me and try to improve these areas, you're going to be drained because you're not being authentic to who you are. Okay, so these are just some ideas that I had, that the book has had, that you can take and then again add the ones that really are relevant to you. Okay, so ways to improve that intimate, that emotional one is vulnerability. Excuse me, being vulnerable, calling up a friend, talking to a colleague that you feel like, man, I feel like I could be friends with you. um, take it that next step and be vulnerable and say like, and I mean, I don't care if you even need to say like, hi, I need a friend and I'm really struggling because I'm an adult and I don't even know how to make friends and but I know I need friends, right? Like, does that make sense? Like, that's real. I promise you I don't know how many conversations I was going to say probably at least once a week with my clients that conversation comes up that I just don't have friends. I don't know how to make friends as an adult, right? So I promise you, you won't be alone in that conversation. And if for whatever reason that person that you chose to be vulnerable with was mean or rude or disrespectful, then say bye-bye and move on because you do not need that person in your life, right? So just like think of that as a process of elimination, that's a good thing. um but so yes, so be truthful and be real. And I love being able to just call it what it is. Like, hi, I need a friend. Would you be willing to be my friend? Like I really do need some connection here. Right. So anyways, that can be just like the best way that you can start it out with. Or maybe you do have those friends right now, but they're kind of surface level. Take it to the next step and be vulnerable with them and tell them about something recently that was hard for you, right? Process that with them. See how they respond. See if they can hold that space for you. And if they can, man, that's beautiful. And then in turn, ask what kind of stuff that you can help and support them with, right? Empathize for them in that way too. Um, being able to affirm those relationships that are in your life now and improving them, right? Because we're talking about that intimate one. And so I think about those relationships that I have in my life that are intimate, of course, my husband now, and knowing that I can strengthen that, right? Like, so being able to give those affirmations to him of like, honey, I'm so grateful that I can have these conversations with you, or thank you so much. Right. Just being able to be vulnerable. Like, I'm so glad I can just be at home with you. So complimenting them, sharing the value that they bring in. So even if it's a sister or a best friend, say, I am so glad that I could just pick up the phone and call you and bitch about my day and that you just receive it. That's so great. You were such a great listener, right? So just being willing again to be honest and transparent in that. The next one for this idea is to just break out of the day to day. Like, man, do we get stuck in that mundane, that autopilot, right? Of just go, 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 clock in, clock out, come home, right? We can just get stuck in that routine. Now, maybe not all of us, but sometimes we can be. And so we need to break out of that. We need to be willing to do something different, willing to do something uncomfortable. So maybe that's, gosh, like the best example I can think of for me is like scheduling the time to call a best friend from college that I haven't talked to in years, right? Why wouldn't I? Because it's out of my routine. I just get in the day to day and I kind of forget. Um, or I think about it and I'm like, oh gosh, she's probably busy. I don't want to bug her. No, bug her, right? Because if I pick up that phone and if I am bugging her, then maybe we're not, you know, connected anymore. And that's okay too. But maybe she's thinking the same thing of like, "Man, I just need a friend." Right? And if I was the one to be like brave and willing and uncomfortable to call first, like that's pretty cool. Maybe that really improves her life, right? That's a pretty good gift that we could give. Okay. Kind of that moves us into this next one, the social piece. So I think one of my favorite things that we can do is to listen. Um, just listen, right? Uh, was it Jess, was it you that said the peacock thing? Wasn't Yes, okay, that was such a good visual. I've been using that since you mentioned it. That was such a great aha moment that I had because I always just said the one-uppers. But yes, it's that peacock mentality. So, oh my gosh, if you all watch Grey's Anatomy, they are the worst at this in this show. Like, Meredith will come in and she'll be, complaining about something, and then whoever it is comes in and then just one-ups her. And I mean, it is just this constant one-upping. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you didn't even address her main concern. And so it just gives me a lot of anxiety. But we do that so, so, so much. And so being able to just listen effectively, like stop one-upping people, right? So we do it on both ends. We one-up them in the sense of, oh, good job. You ran 4 miles. That's awesome. I just ran 5 miles last week in my sleep. No, I'm just kidding. And so that's an example, right? And I don't think that's as common as this. The gosh, I hurt my leg running, and then the person comes back. Oh yeah, last week I broke my leg and it was so awful. And oh my gosh, you're so lucky that you didn't break your leg. So they one up like the worst case scenario. Either way, it's BS and it needs to stop. And we need to be able to listen to that person's story, tell me, and be more empathetic, right? Develop that empathy. If you have not seen the Brene Brown's video on empathy, Google it, just Brene Brown empathy, it'll come right up. It is such a good visual of how we need to just sit with our friends, our people, and listen and not one up and not try to fix and not try to solve the problems. Instead, just listen and say, I'm sorry you have a problem, right? Like that. And I say this to my husband every time. If he just said that to me, man, my heart, right? That would feel so much better than like, well, don't worry about it. I laugh because it's just, yeah, so real. Oh, okay, let me do that. That'll fix it all. Thanks. Anyways, I digress. Um, so develop that empathy, listen efficiently and effectively. Scheduling in, right? Schedule in the time because again, we have these like, oh, we shoulds, and we'll text somebody, oh, we should really get together, or we should connect, or we should call and talk, and then you don't, right? Life is again busy and full, and so schedule it. I loved our self-care. The tip this week is to schedule our self-care, like schedule the next appointment. So when you go get the massage, like book the next one before you leave, kind of thing. Same thing with a girlfriend or with a best friend or a partner or whatever. Like, you get off the phone, man, that was so good chatting with you. We should do it more often. Okay, schedule when. When can we do that? All right, let's do a thing every Monday night. We're going to chat, right, with your mom or somebody. That would be really great. Okay. Okay. So then the next one is this ways the collective piece. How can we improve those relationships? I think the biggest thing is just being willing to step outside your comfort zone. This is a tough one, right? I can definitely relate to like our church and that piece that's really been fulfilled these last probably I think 5 years now that we've been going, and it was the most uncomfortable and scary thing for me because I came from such a different world, and so it was really intimidating for us to go into that, like literally stepping into the church and building these relationships when we just didn't know anything. So again, it doesn't have to be that for you, and maybe that's irrelevant, and that's okay. But what's something similar? What can you do that's going to be uncomfortable, but man, it's going to be the thing that adds so much, right? Because as soon as we like, here's our comfort zone, and we're sitting in here in the circle, and it's all comfortable, and it's safe and secure. And then the second that we step outside of that comfort zone, there's a whole world, right, of growth and life to experience and all the good and the beauty that God has given us, right? And so recognizing where can you step outside that comfort zone, in which direction, do something different. You won't know until you try it, right? So maybe I don't know, I can think of like getting involved in like a sports thing or a running group, or we play volleyball. Sand volleyball is one of my favorite things in the world. Yeah, it was totally different and new, and kind of stepping outside the comfort zone because we didn't know how good the teams were and how much they would make fun of us or whatnot. But it's those things that we got to do something. They got to break up that mundane again, doing something different. And so maybe it's volunteering on a Saturday, um, at the local, animal shelter or something like that. Again, doing something outside that comfort zone that can really, you'll relate to those people. If that's something you're crazy passionate about, great. You're going to be able to do that with them and have that same sense of purpose as well. Okay. So that's really that breakdown of how can you increase those areas, specifically talking about those 3 dimensions. Some of the other things I want you guys watching the recording to reflect on your own time. Reach out to your trained supporter and ask these questions during your guys' next session, or message about them. But asking yourself truthfully, are you feeling lonely? And we'll have a little bit of a conversation about this here in a second with those watching live. um, can you be yourself around others? Like, truly, can you do that? Can you be 100% yourself? Is it feeling at home? What are those warning signs, right? What are your warning signs that you may start being lonely? Right? Mine, it's such a catch 22, because when I'm starting to feel lonely, I want to withdraw more, right? I want to like isolate myself even more. And hello, like, gosh, it's going to be double whammy now. So recognizing that. Have you ever felt this way in the past? um how did you overcome it in the past, right? Maybe you were new to school, or you were new to a town, and you had a new to a church, and you had to develop these relationships. What did you do before? How could you increase that again? Okay. And so I want to leave the recording with this, that the story of loneliness is actually a hopeful one. It's a story that doesn't just end with sadness and increased risk for illness, like we talked about, right? It reveals the power of human connection. So that's the best part. That's the best news about this, is that we don't have to go and get a a prescription. We don't have to go and do something crazy different or move or pick, we don't have to do anything other than develop human connection. And we're surrounded by humans, even if it has to be virtual for now, but we are. So recognizing that you guys can make that change. So I encourage anybody watching the recording, reach out if you have any questions, or if you want to dive deeper into any of these things, or if you're really experiencing some of that loneliness and you're like, oh, how can I get some support? Reach out. Okay. No matter which level you're at within the community, that's what we're here for. Okay. We love you so much. We're so grateful to be able to create this sense of community. So reach out, and we will be talking soon.